Hey guys, welcome to the Nerdvine. This is Pradeep Chaudhary, and in this video, we'll be continuing with our fast API. So before moving on and adding a persistent data store like Postgres database to store and retrieve data from that, like we'll be adding few other required methods like put and delete. So let's get started with our methods. So I would be starting from where I left, and let me open my VS Code. Oops. Yes. So this is where we left. So in the previous video, what we had done is we had like modularized our code. So we had our base model in a file, a models.py, all the routes related to student data in students.py and the main.py, including the student route with the prefix. So this is where we left. So if you guys haven't checked out my previous videos, to check it out before moving, like before watching this video. So let's go ahead and let's add our output route. So we'll use the student router here, and we'll be defining this as put method. So in this put method, we'll be taking a couple of inputs. One input would be the ID of the student data that we want to modify. So put is nothing basically when we use put is like when we want to modify a particular data in a data store, we use put operation or put method. So first parameter would be taking the ID of the student that we want to modify. So we'd be taking it directly from the URL, and this is one of the parameter that we need to take, and it would also be exposed as the index at the index node. Then we would go ahead and we would like define the path operation. We'd call it update student, and in this update student, like would specify that we have taken the end from the URL and the payload of the student data. So this is the path operation that we have for our put operation. And in this, what we would do is, okay, let's add a login statement real quick. Trying to modify student data for ID. We'll just use the formatting here. Format str and okay, perfect. So we added the login statement, then would convert the payload data that is coming using the student class into text. So the student has the text now, then would get the student length of the total number of data dictionaries that is there in our fake student data currently. Sorry about typo. Yes, it seems correct. Okay. Student length. So to get the student length, what we'll do is we'll find the get the length of the student data directly. Then we'll just then what we'll do is we'll check if the ID lies between 0 or and student length or not. If it doesn't lie, then we are sure that ID that particular ID doesn't exist in our list for that student. So we'll be returning some messages like some error message for in those scenarios. So first we'll put in condition for the ID to check if the ID is available in the fixed student data. So if ID lies between 0 and student length, we know that the ID is there. And what we do is we just modify the fake student data in the ID index with the student data that comes from the by converting the payload student class to student object to dictionary. So after that, we'll just return null in this scenario because like we don't have to return anything. Okay, so now if the ID is not available, what should we return? So ideally, what we should return is an proper error message that this ID doesn't like it's not available. And to do this, what we'll do is we'll be raising an HTTP exception. Okay, to raise an HTTP exception, first let's go ahead and add HTTP exception to the FastAPI libraries imported. So now HTTP exception has been imported. Now we'll raise the HTTP exception error. So HTTP exception takes a couple of parameters. Actually, it takes multiple parameters depending on like what you want to do. You can use whatever parameter is valid for you. So we'll send the status code as 404. 404 is like not generally it's for not found. So we'll be sending HTTP exception with status code 404, and would send the detail of the excuse me, detail of the HTTP exception as well. So we'll just say student with given ID so not found, and we'll just have to format here. Let's see our ID. So yeah, so this is it for the put method. Now let's try running it. Let's see if there are any errors. We'll go ahead and fix it. We'll cd into the directory. Let's just do it as cd app. Then before running the uv command, we'll activate the environment that we have created already. So we'll do the conda activate FastAPI demo. Then we'll run the uvcon command. We'll just copy paste from the readme.md file. So okay, now we see there is an error. Okay, sorry, I missed. Okay, now let's run it again. Okay, application startup is successful now. So now we'll go ahead and open the Swagger UI. Sorry, the code is wrong here. It should be Git. Okay, so now we can see we have one more route here. So now let's try it out first. The get route, we can see two dictionaries there. We'll add a few student details later. Then we'll try to modify one of the IDs of the students. So say they're not fine modified. Then we'll add a degree here and section something. So okay, we get an internal server error. So let's see. Um, Tick takes exactly one positional argument, zero given. Let's go ahead and let's see what's wrong with this. Okay, so payload dot ticked. Okay, so it should be payload dot ticked instead of student object. Okay, so the student object is coming as the parameter payload here. So we should be converting payload to ticked rather than converting student object to ticked. Okay, so now we fix that. Now let's go ahead and we'll try it out again. We'll put in the parameters and try to take something. We'll put in some section. And okay, now we get a null response body with status code 200. So now we know our API worked fine. Okay, so now how do we know it worked fine? So now let's go ahead and use the get route to see what is the data of the in the student list. So we can see the second one has been modified to the node find mod. The name has been modified and the other values as well. So we know this works. So now what if input a value had then what is that? So now here we get a 404 status code error with the detail student with given ID 4 not 4. So so we know our HTTP exception is showing like raising the errors correctly. So yeah, this is like pretty much with the put route will be like of course will be pulling and modifying data from database directly in the future videos. Yes. So now we'll do one more thing real quick. We'll add one more get route. So what we'll do is this get route will give you the individual student detail rather than returning you all the details of the student. So we'll take the ID parameter here so that we can return um, uh, the student data for the correct ID. So we'll pass in the parameter ID in the path operation as well, which will be an int data. And with okay, so let's go ahead and make this path operation get students because we are returning all student data here. And in this case, we'll be returning a single student data. So line number 29, we're modifying the path operation to get students. Okay, so now we'll modify the log statement, getting student detail for student with ID and zero dot format. We'll add the format as for the str ID. So now what we'll do is we'll just return fake student data with index ID. So okay, before that we would add a like the similar if condition that we had for output operation, so that we do a check of if the ID is existing in the correct current student data or not. So we get the student length, then we'll apply the condition if 0 less than equal to ID less than student length, then we know the ID is existing. Then what we'll do is we'll just return fake student data with the ID. If this is not the case, we'll be raising an HTTP exception with status code again, 404, and detail student with given ID 0 not found, and we'll just add the format here. Okay, so now we added our get route. Now let's go ahead and let's test it this one. So I generally prefer to add one route and test it first before adding the next route. It's just a matter of preference. So now we can see 4 routes. Now let's go ahead and we'll test each of the routes. So let's add one more data. Then I'll try and add it and post talk. Now we just add some values here. Same section. We'll do execute here. Then let's go ahead and let's see if we're being returned 3 student data in the list or not. We are being returned 3. So now let's get individual student details for the route, like using the route that we just added. Okay, so we are getting an internal server error. So now let's go ahead and we'll see what's error. Okay, so now we are getting value is not a valid list. Okay, so let's see what's the issue. So in this student.get, we are using the response model. Like we are trying to respond, like we are like telling FastAPI that the response model will be of type list, which will be a list of student tools, but which is not correct. What we are returning is individual student detail. So we'd be returning only the student. So response model should be just not list of students. So yes, now we have fixed that. Now let's go ahead and we'll refresh it. Now we'll try this first. Okay. Okay, student with given ID 2 not found. Let's try with 1 here. Yes, now we are able to get the details for ID1, student with ID1. So now let's go ahead and we'll modify the student with ID1. We'll put some value. Then, okay, now we are being returned null, so we know it works with status code 1. So now let's go ahead and let's see the details for ID1 again, and we can see the modified values coming here. If we do a get request, we will be able to see the mod values here as well. Okay. So now we know all the both our get methods are working, our post method is working, our put method is working. We'll go ahead and we'll add one more route, which will be the delete route. So if we need to delete any student detail, we'll be using this route, and would be you will be asking for the ID from the user that they want to delete the user student detail for. So again, student will use the student router, student dot delete, because we're using the delete method now. We need the parameter ID in the URL, and we'll find path operation delete student, and we'll be taking ID as parameter here. And after that, we'll just add a dot statement. identity, and we'll be getting the student length first to check if the ID is um, like available in the list of our student data that we have or not. To get this, we'll just do student length is equal to length of fake student data, and we'll check if the ID is there or not. If 0 less than equal to ID less than student length, and what we'll do is we'll just delete fake student data in that index, and we'll return null. If the ID is not, okay, sorry, I missed this thing symbol here. Okay. If the ID is not available, we'll just raise the HTTP exception with status code 404 and detail as student with an ID found format. Okay. So now let's go ahead and let's go to try. Let's see if everything is working or not. Okay, our EPS started correctly. Now let's refresh it. Now let's see. Okay, now we have the student out as well. So now we'll try. Let's try the student delete route first. We'll see if this works or not. Let's put in one. We'll see. Okay, now we are getting a null with status code 200 and no error in our terminal as well. So we know it's working correctly. So now let's do the get method and we'll see how many student data is there. So now we are getting like only one student data instead of two. So now let's go ahead and let's delete that as well. So we are getting a null here. That means we know it works. So here again, now we have deleted all of our student data. So now we'll go ahead and we'll add one more student data here. Uh, Nerdline, some grad, and some section, and execute, and we can see the ID is 0 for it now. You can see it being added here as well. We can get individual student detail as well. So we can get the individual student detail. We can modify individual student details. So we'll do a quick modification as well. And some section. So now let's go ahead and get the details for that particular student ID, and we can see the modified student details here. So we'll go ahead and we'll delete it as well. We'll see. Yes, now we have deleted that as well. Now let's see the total number. It should be 0 ideally. Okay, perfect. So yeah, now all of our routes are working, and like we have all the methods that we require for our CRUD operations. So this is it for this video. In the next video, what we'll be doing is we'll be setting up our environment for our Postgres database in a local. So in an ideal scenario, when you're developing something, when you're developing an application, everything should be testable in your local or in someone's local. So that like saves the developers a lot of testing time, and it helps on the developers in a lot of ways actually. So it's very important to structure your API in such a way that someone can test it in local without any issues, deploy it to development without any issues, and once everything is working in development, everything is tested out, move it to production without any issues. So it should be structured in such a way. So in the next video, we'll be keeping that in mind throughout the entire video series, and will be the focus will be how to make it testable, scalable, extendable. So this is it for this video. If you like it, do subscribe, share it with your friends, colleagues, and have a good day. Thanks.